What happens when two people who've spent years drifting apart finally find their way back to each other? Can love truly heal the wounds of neglect and betrayal? Or is it too late to start over? Tonight's story isn't just about rekindling love. It's about the price of waiting too long and the heart-stopping moment when everything changes. If you've ever wondered if second chances are real, hit that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment about this story, and stay tuned. Because this is one journey of rediscovery that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about love, trust, and the power of vulnerability. James Morgan had everything any man could dream of: wealth, success, and a reputation that had spread like wildfire. His name was synonymous with brilliance in the world of business. As a self-made millionaire, James had built his empire from the ground up, turning every challenge into an opportunity. But behind the towering skyscrapers of his achievements, something important was crumbling. His marriage to Ava, his wife, was the epitome of grace and beauty. She had been his anchor when he first started his journey. They were young, full of dreams, and deeply in love. Her laugh, her touch, her warmth, everything about her seemed to fit perfectly with him. She was the one who stood by him during sleepless nights and endless hustle, always believing in the man he could become. But now, she barely recognized the man beside her. In the beginning, their love had been all-consuming. James would sweep her off her feet with romantic gestures, surprise getaways, and passionate evenings that left them both breathless. Their chemistry was undeniable, and Ava had always felt cherished, adored, and desired. But that had all changed once James's business started booming. At first, it wasn't obvious. The late nights at the office turned into more frequent, longer hours. Ava would still catch glimpses of his smile and hear stories about his day, but soon even those small moments started fading. The smile was no longer for her. It was for the success he had worked so hard for. The stories were no longer about their shared life, but about meetings, deals, and numbers. The passion that once filled their home slowly evaporated, replaced with silence. Ava tried to ignore the growing distance. She threw herself into various projects, trying to keep busy and distracted from the aching emptiness she felt. She arranged dinner parties, hosted gatherings, and tried to show James that their life together still had meaning. But despite her efforts, the gap between them grew wider. James's attention was elsewhere, and no matter how much she craved his affection, it seemed like it would never come. James didn't see the problem. He was doing everything he thought he should be doing, working hard to secure their future, ensuring they had everything they could ever want. To him, providing her with material wealth was the answer. He had built his success with his own two hands, and that was all that mattered. He had always believed that if he could give Ava everything she wanted, she would be happy. But the truth was, Ava didn't care about the lavish dinners or the luxury cars. She longed for the love, the connection, and the intimacy they once shared. One night, after another lonely dinner, Ava sat on the couch watching James scroll through his phone. She looked at him, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the screen, and wondered what had happened to the man who used to look at her with so much love in his eyes. He barely even glanced up at her anymore. "James," she said softly, her voice shaking slightly, "can we talk?" He didn't look up. "Not now, Ava. I've got work to do." She felt the sting of his words more than she cared to admit. "James," she repeated, her voice more insistent, "this can't keep going on like this. I'm feeling like we're just two strangers living in the same house." He put his phone down, but his expression was more irritated than concerned. "You know how important this work is to me, Ava. We're building something here. Something big, I know," she whispered. "But what about us? What about me?" James's jaw tightened, and for a brief moment, Ava thought she saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. We'll talk later, okay? I promise. But not now." And just like that, the conversation ended. Ava sighed deeply, feeling the familiar knot of loneliness twist in her stomach. She had tried to reach out, but it felt like nothing ever changed. For the next few days, Ava kept herself busy, trying to ignore the growing emptiness. She threw herself into volunteer work, spent more time with friends, and even took up yoga. Anything to distract herself from the aching pain of being ignored by the man she still loved. But deep down, she knew she couldn't escape it forever. James, on the other hand, continued down the same path. Every day his empire grew, but so did the distance between them. The more successful he became, the less he noticed Ava's absence. He would come home late, barely speak to her, and fall into bed exhausted. He couldn't remember the last time they had shared a quiet evening, just the two of them, without the constant buzz of his phone or thoughts about his next business move. Their marriage was a ticking time bomb, and neither of them seemed to realize it, at least not yet. 3 years had passed since Ava's heart had last fluttered with the love she once shared with James. Those years were filled with a kind of quiet agony that only the emotionally abandoned can understand. On the surface, everything seemed perfect. James continued to climb the ladder of success, his empire expanding and his wealth multiplying. To the world, he was a man who had it all. But at home, the silence between him and Ava had become suffocating. James, now entrenched in his work, had slowly begun to forget what it was like to hold his wife in his arms without feeling like it was just another chore to check off. He had convinced himself that his hard work was for their future, for their children, for their happiness. But he had ignored the one thing that mattered most, Ava's emotional and physical needs. Ava, on the other hand, had grown used to the emptiness. She had stopped waiting for James to come to bed. She had stopped hoping for an affectionate glance or a meaningful conversation. Instead, she buried herself in work, in friends, in whatever could distract her from the pain that had now become part of her daily existence. Yet, no matter how hard she tried to fill the void, nothing seemed to make her feel whole. The house they shared was no longer a home. It was a mere structure where two people coexisted, silently passing each other, by never really seeing each other. The nights were the hardest. Ava would lie awake, her mind running through 1,000 scenarios, each more heartbreaking than the last. She remembered their early days, how James used to caress her cheek softly before sleep, how he'd whisper his love to her, and how they would fall asleep in each other's arms. Now she barely knew who he was. One particularly quiet evening, Ava found herself sitting on the porch, looking out at the stars. Her phone buzzed with a notification, and for a fleeting moment, she hoped it was James, trying to make things right. But as she glanced down, she saw it was just another reminder from her work inbox. Is this it? She thought. Is this really how my life has turned out? Waiting for someone who doesn't even seem to care? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the door opening. James stepped out onto the porch, his face tired from a long day at the office. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. For a second, he seemed to hesitate, as if he wanted to say something, but then he just nodded and walked past her. Ava felt a wave of disappointment rush over her. For 3 years, she had begged for a moment of connection, a sign that he still cared. But all she had gotten in return was silence. That night, after a quiet dinner where neither of them spoke more than a few words, Ava found herself pacing in their bedroom, unable to shake the feeling of complete isolation. She stared at James, who was already asleep, his back turned to her. She longed to reach out to touch him, but there was something in the air, a wall that had been built between them so high she didn't know how to climb it. She had tried everything she could think of. She had suggested therapy. She had suggested taking a vacation together. She had even bought new lingerie in the hopes of rekindling the physical connection. But nothing had worked. Each time she reached out, she was met with indifference or avoidance. It was as if James had become a stranger, someone she no longer recognized. But despite the years of silence, a part of her still clung to the hope that there was something left of the man she had once known. The man who had swept her off her feet and made her feel like she was the center of his universe. In a moment of frustration, she made a decision. She would confront him again, not with anger, not with blame, but with honesty. She couldn't keep living this way. The loneliness had eaten away at her soul, and she refused to let it consume her any longer. The next evening, as they sat in their living room, the tension was palpable. James was reading something on his phone, as usual, and Ava was fiddling with a magazine, not really paying attention. She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "James," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. He glanced up briefly. "I can't do this anymore," she said, the words heavy in the air. He frowned, slightly lowering his phone. "What do you mean?" "This," she motioned between them. "This distance, the silence, the emptiness." Her voice trembled. "I miss you. I miss the person you used to be. I miss us." James's expression softened for a moment, but then it hardened. "Again. Ava, I'm doing this for us, for our future. We're building something here, don't you see that?" Ava's heart sank. She had heard this excuse so many times. "But I'm here too, James. I'm a part of our future, not just some afterthought. I need more than just your money, your success. I need you." There was a long pause as James stared at her, his face unreadable. He didn't say anything, just looked down at his phone again, as if her words hadn't even registered. Ava stood up, the pain of rejection stinging more than ever. "I need more than this, James. I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when I feel like I'm losing you." She turned to walk out of the room, but stopped at the door. "Maybe you need to think about what you really want. Maybe it's not me, but if it is, I need to know that we can work through this together." She left the room, her heart heavy, but also lighter in a strange way. She had spoken her truth. Now it was up to James to decide what he wanted. The days that followed Ava's heartfelt confrontation were filled with an eerie stillness. James had barely acknowledged what she had said. He continued with his work, buried in the same routines that had become a barrier between them. Ava, however, felt the weight of those words she had spoken to him, still hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. She had always been the one to try and fix things. She had spent the last 3 years trying to make their marriage work, pouring her heart into the relationship while James built his empire. But now, for the first time, something inside her had shifted. She was tired. Tired of waiting for change, tired of pleading for attention, and tired of feeling like a ghost in her own home. One morning, as she sat in the living room staring at the sun peeking through the blinds, the decision hit her like a wave. She needed to stop waiting. Ava had always been the hopeful one, the one who believed that love could overcome any obstacle. But now she was starting to wonder if she had been too naive. What if love wasn't enough anymore? She had given so much of herself to James, and yet it felt like he had stopped caring. The man she had once fallen in love with, the man who had made her feel alive and cherished, was nowhere to be found. Instead, there was a man who saw her only as a companion, someone to share a roof with, not someone he desired or needed. The weight of that realization pressed heavily on her chest. Was it time to let go? Ava had never been one to give up on anything, especially not her marriage. But this was different. She couldn't keep living in this emotional limbo. She couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when her heart felt shattered. It was time to face the truth. She reached for her phone, her fingers hesitating as she thought about what she was about to do. She had to make a choice for herself, and it wasn't an easy one. With a deep breath, she opened her messages and typed a few words, then deleted them. The message would be too much of a confrontation. She needed to be face to face with him. Ava didn't want to leave James, but she realized she couldn't stay in this state of uncertainty forever. She had spent too many sleepless nights wondering if things would ever change. She needed clarity. She needed to know if there was still a chance for their marriage, or if it had already slipped away from their grasp. As the afternoon turned to evening, she found herself standing at the doorway of their bedroom, watching James as he worked on his laptop. The same scene, day after day, the same isolation. This time, instead of sitting beside him, pretending to read or waiting for his attention, Ava knew she had to speak her truth again, this time without hesitation. "James," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and resolve. He looked up from his screen, surprised by her tone. "What is it, Ava?" Her heart raced, but she steadied herself. This had to be done. "We need to talk. I can't keep doing this." James frowned, closing his laptop and sitting back in his chair. "What are you talking about? We talked about this already. I'm doing this for us. We're building something great here." Ava could feel the frustration rising in her chest, but she remained calm. "No, James, you're building something for you, but I'm not part of it anymore. I'm not just a wife who waits around for you to finish your work. I'm not just someone you check in with for the sake of it. I need more than that. I need you, all of you, not just the man who's buried in his work." James's expression faltered. He seemed almost shocked, as if he hadn't realized how deep her pain had become. "Ava, I didn't know you felt this way." Ava took a deep breath, trying to keep her emotions in check. "I've tried, James. I've tried to make things work, but I can't keep pretending that everything is fine when I feel so alone. I can't. And keep waiting for something to change when you're not even looking at me." James's eyes softened, but Ava could see the hesitation. He was struggling to understand, but there was something in his eyes now, a flicker of realization that hadn't been there before. "You don't understand," Ava continued, her voice breaking. "I've given everything I have to this marriage, but I'm not sure I can do it anymore. I need to know if you still want us, or if I've been holding on to something that's already gone." For a moment there was silence. The air between them was thick with unsaid words, emotions they had both buried deep inside. James finally stood up from his chair and walked over to her, but he didn't touch her. He just stood there looking at her, as if he were trying to piece together what had just happened. "I never meant for it to get like this," he said quietly. "I didn't realize how much I'd pulled away from you." Ava met his gaze, her heart in turmoil. "James, I'm not asking you to change overnight. I just need to know if you're willing to try, to truly try, and not just throw money at our problems. I need the man I married, not just the businessman." James swallowed, his face tight with emotion. "I don't know if I can go back to what we were. I've been so focused on what I've been building that I've neglected everything else." Ava nodded, her heart sinking. She had given him every chance to prove himself, but now she wasn't sure if there was anything left to save. "I can't keep waiting for you to wake up, James," she whispered. "I need more than what you're giving me." The room felt suffocating. Ava's mind raced, torn between the love she still had for him and the life she had spent years building in the shadow of his neglect. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her, but she knew it was time. Something had to change. The days following Ava's confrontation with James felt like an endless cycle of hope and disappointment. Despite the emotional clarity she had gained by finally speaking up, nothing seemed to change. James had promised to make an effort, but each day seemed to pass with the same routine: long hours at work, late nights in front of his computer, and more silent dinners. Ava could sense that he was trying in his own way, but his efforts felt hollow, like trying to fill a bottomless pit with empty promises. Ava had spent years trying to keep their connection alive, But now, as she sat in their living room, she felt the weight of their separation more than ever. The once vibrant and loving home they had built together now felt like a cold, lifeless shell. The laughter, the warmth, the shared moments that had defined their relationship were long gone. She sat at the edge of the couch, staring at the space between them as James worked in his study. The air between them was thick with unspoken words. He had barely touched her since that night of their confrontation, and Ava couldn't help but feel the growing distance between them, like a tangible force pushing them further apart. She had tried to fill the emptiness by staying busy. She threw herself into her work, reconnected with old friends, and even started a few new hobbies she had put on hold for years. But none of it worked. She couldn't escape the nagging feeling that something was fundamentally broken in their marriage. The loneliness she had once tried to ignore was now all-consuming, and no matter how much she tried to distract herself, it never went away. Every time she passed by James in the hallway or caught a glimpse of him lost in his world, she felt a pang in her chest. The man she had once known, the one who had made her feel seen and loved, had become a stranger. They were both in the same house, but they were worlds apart. One night, Ava couldn't take it any longer. She had spent the entire evening trying to distract herself by reading, but all she could think about was James. He had come home late again, barely acknowledging her presence. He was still immersed in his work, as though nothing had changed. She felt the tears welling up in her eyes as she watched him, and she knew, deep down, that she couldn't keep living like this. For years, she had been the one to keep their marriage afloat, silently accepting the pain of feeling invisible in her own home. But now she was no longer willing to let that happen. She had already tried everything, spoken her truth, asked for his attention, and even given him the space to figure things out. But James's inability to truly see her and the distance between them were becoming too much to bear. She stood up from the couch and walked to the bedroom. The silence of the house was almost deafening. She opened the door and found James sitting on the edge of the bed, his laptop still open in front of him. His tired eyes met hers, but he didn't speak. "Ava?" he asked quietly, his voice tinged with exhaustion. She hesitated for a moment, the weight of her emotions threatening to overwhelm her. But she knew she had to say it. She couldn't keep pretending everything was okay when her heart was breaking. "James, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep waiting for you to wake up and realize that I need you." He sighed, closing the laptop and running a hand through his hair. "Ava, I don't know what you want me to do. I've been trying, I swear. I just don't know how to fix this." She shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "Trying isn't enough, James. Trying doesn't bring back the love we used to have. Trying doesn't make me feel wanted or seen. You've been trying to fix everything with your work, but I'm still here, alone. I need more than that. I need you." James stood up, his eyes filled with frustration and confusion. "I don't know what you want from me. I've been working to secure our future, to give you everything you need, but I feel like I'm losing you, no matter what I do." Ava's heart ached as she looked at him. She could see the pain in his eyes, but it wasn't the same pain she had felt for the last 3 years. It was a different kind of hurt, a realization that he was losing her, but not truly understanding why. "I don't need things, James," she said softly, her voice breaking. "I don't need your money, your success, or your business. I need you. I need to feel like I matter to you, like I'm more than just someone you live with. I need the man I married, the one who saw me as his equal, not just his wife." James looked away, his jaw tight. "I've been trying, Ava. I don't know what else to do." Ava took a deep breath and stepped closer to him, her voice steady now. "I'm not asking you to have all the answers. I'm not asking you to fix everything. But I can't keep living in this empty shell of a marriage. I can't keep pretending that I'm okay when I'm not. I need to know if you're still in this with me, or if I'm just holding on to something that's already gone." For a moment, the silence between them was suffocating. Ava could feel her heart racing, the fear of what might happen next creeping in. She had put everything on the line, laid herself bare, and now it was up to James to decide if he was willing to fight for her or if their love was truly gone. The days that followed were filled with a strange kind of tension, thick with anticipation. James was a man of action, usually decisive and pragmatic, but now he was lost in thought. It was as if Ava's words had shattered the carefully constructed walls he had built around himself, and he didn't know how to rebuild them. She had always been there, quietly waiting for him to notice her pain. But now things were different. Ava had pulled back, and James could feel it. Ava, for her part, tried to go about her days as best as she could. She went back to her usual routines, but everything felt different. The silence between her and James was now not just about their lack of communication. It was about the uncertainty of their future. She had hoped that by confronting him, by putting everything on the table, things would start to change. But James had been distant, lost in his work, and Ava couldn't help but wonder if this was truly the end. James hadn't mentioned their conversation again, but Ava noticed subtle shifts in his behavior. He'd come home earlier than usual, his phone often left untouched on the kitchen counter. He began spending more time at home, not just physically present, but mentally as well. Ava noticed him starting to look at her differently, as though he was trying to see her again, not just as his wife, but as someone who mattered deeply to him. One evening, after a quiet dinner, James surprised her. He turned to her as they were clearing the table and simply said, "Ava, can we talk?" Her heart skipped a beat. For the first time in a long while, she heard the sincerity in his voice, the vulnerability she had so desperately longed for. She nodded, her voice quiet. "About what?" "I've been thinking," James said, running a hand through his hair, his eyes searching hers. "I've been thinking about what you said, about how I've been so caught up in everything and neglected what really matters. I'm not proud of it, Ava. I don't want to lose you, and I don't want you to feel like you don't matter to me. You do. You've always mattered." Ava stood still, unsure of how to react. Was this the moment she had been waiting for? Was James finally waking up to the gravity of what had been happening between them? "I know I've hurt you," James continued, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been so focused on my work, on building something that would provide for both of us, but I realize now that it wasn't enough. I can't build a future without you in it, and I can't keep pretending that my success is everything. I want you back, Ava. I want us back." Ava's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't heard those words from him in years. Words that were not just about material things or responsibilities, but about the emotional connection they once had. For a moment, she stood there, unsure if this was real or just another attempt at placating her. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw something she hadn't seen in a long time. Genuine regret, vulnerability, and a desire to make things right. She wanted to believe him, but the fear of getting hurt again made her hesitate. James stepped closer to her, closing the distance between them. "Ava, I know it's going to take time. I know I've let you down, but I'm ready to do whatever it takes to make things right. I'm not asking you to forgive me right away, but I need you to know that I'm here, I'm present, and I'm not going anywhere." The weight of his words sank deep into Ava's heart, and for the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope. Could this really be happening? Could James, the man who had been so distant for so long, finally be ready to give her the love she had always craved? "I don't know what to say," Ava whispered, her voice trembling. "I've waited so long for you to see me. I've waited for you to notice the pain, the loneliness. I've begged for you to come back to me, but now I'm scared." What if this is just a moment, and then you slip back into your old ways? What if I let myself hope again and end up disappointed? James reached out, gently taking her hands in his. I understand your fear, Ava. I've hurt you too much for you to just let go of it, but I want you to know that I'm not asking you to forget the past. I'm asking you to let me prove that I can change, that I will change. I've been blind to what matters most, and I don't want to be that man anymore. Ava's heart was torn. The man standing before her was not the same man who had neglected her for so long. This James was different, more open, more aware of her pain, and more willing to do whatever it took to rebuild their bond. But the scar of their past was not easily erased. The trust she had once freely given him had been broken, and she didn't know if she could give it back so easily. Could she really believe in him again? Could she let herself fall back into his arms without fear of being abandoned once more? For a moment, she was silent, processing everything he had said. Then, with a deep breath, she spoke. I want to believe you, James. I want to believe that things can be different, but I can't do this alone. I need to know you're in this with me, not just for now, but for the long haul. I need to know that I'm not just an afterthought in your life, that I'm not just something you'll push aside when the next big thing comes along. James nodded, his eyes filled with determination. You have my word, Ava. I'll do whatever it takes. I know it won't be easy, but I'm willing to fight for us. For the first time in a long while, Ava felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't the grand gesture she had once dreamed of, but it was something real, a promise. And in that moment she decided to take a leap of faith, to trust that maybe, just maybe, this time James was telling her the truth. The days following their conversation were nothing short of a quiet revolution. James's actions spoke louder than his words ever could. He was determined to prove that he was ready to fight for their marriage, and Ava couldn't help but watch him, cautiously optimistic as he worked to regain her trust. For the first time in years, James's focus was no longer solely on his business. He started leaving work early, choosing to spend more time at home. His phone, once a constant companion, now lay forgotten on the kitchen counter. He began making small gestures, texting Ava just to check in during the day, bringing home flowers, preparing dinner when she had been too busy to do so. These little things, things he had once neglected, were beginning to chip away at the wall of emotional distance that had built up over the past 3 years. But Ava, though deeply moved by his efforts, remained cautious. She had been hurt too many times to believe that change could happen overnight. The trust that had been shattered between them would not be so easily mended. That evening, as they sat together in the living room after dinner, Ava decided it was time to take another step forward, not just for the sake of her marriage, but for herself. She had spent so many years focused on James's success, on the idea of saving their relationship, that she had neglected her own needs, her own happiness. It was time to reclaim that. It was time to stop waiting for James to be the person she needed him to be and start being that person for herself. I've been thinking, Ava began, her voice quiet but steady. I've been focusing so much on trying to fix us that I forgot to fix me. I've lost sight of who I am outside of this marriage, outside of what I've been waiting for. James looked at her, his expression softening with concern. What do you mean? I mean, she continued, taking a deep breath, that I've spent so much time putting all my energy into making you see me that I lost myself in the process. I need to find that part of me again. The part of me that doesn't rely on you to feel whole. I need to rediscover who I am outside of this relationship. James was quiet for a moment, processing her words. Then, without hesitation, he spoke. Ava, I want that for you. I don't want you to feel like you have to carry everything on your own, but I do want you to find yourself again. You deserve that. I'll support you, whatever you need. Ava's heart swelled at his words, but she still felt the weight of uncertainty. Could she truly find herself again? And if she did, what would that mean for them? Over the next few days, Ava took the first steps toward rediscovering her own identity. She signed up for an art class she'd always wanted to take, but had put off for years. She called up old friends she had lost touch with, letting them in on her life and allowing herself to be vulnerable in a way she hadn't done in a long time. She made time to focus on her passions, reading, painting, walking in the park, anything that made her feel alive again. James, for his part, respected her space. He didn't push, didn't demand anything from her. He gave her the time she needed to figure things out, but he was also there when she needed him, offering his support and love in the small, thoughtful ways he had started to master. One evening, after a particularly fulfilling art class, Ava found herself sitting on the porch, looking out at the horizon. She felt lighter than she had in years, her heart less burdened by the weight of expectation. She was beginning to understand something important, that she didn't need to depend on James for her happiness. That happiness could be something she cultivated within herself. James joined her on the porch, sitting down beside her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It was a peaceful silence, one filled with understanding and a quiet sense of contentment. "I'm proud of you," James said softly, breaking the silence, "for finding your way again. I know it hasn't been easy." Ava turned to him, her heart full. "I couldn't have done it without you, James, but I've realized that I have to be the one to make myself happy. I can't wait for anyone else to do it for me." James smiled, his eyes filled with admiration. "You're right. You've always had that strength in you, Ava. I'm just glad I can be here for the ride." The sincerity in his voice filled Ava with hope. She wasn't sure what the future held, but in that moment she realized that healing didn't just happen from external forces, it came from within. It was about rediscovering who they both were as individuals, and then choosing to come together, not out of necessity, but out of love and a shared commitment to grow. They both knew there was still a long road ahead. Trust would take time to rebuild, and there would be moments of doubt and fear, but they also knew that they were both committed to working through the challenges side by side. For the first time in years, Ava felt like she was on the right path, not just for her marriage, but for herself, and that was a place of strength she hadn't realized she had been missing. Weeks passed, and the tension that had once choked the life out of their marriage began to dissipate, replaced by a tentative, fragile connection. The walls that James had built around himself were slowly crumbling, and Ava was allowing herself to believe that perhaps their love wasn't entirely lost. But even as things between them seemed to improve, Ava knew that healing was a process, not a destination. James had continued to show up, not just physically but emotionally. He listened when she spoke, offering support when she needed it and taking responsibility for the pain he had caused. It was different this time. His apologies were not just words, but actions. He wasn't just talking about change, he was living it. And for the first time in years, Ava felt the stirrings of the woman she used to be, the woman who had fallen in love with this man. Still, Ava wasn't blind to the challenges that lay ahead. Rebuilding trust wasn't something that happened overnight. Every now and then, she would catch herself holding back, afraid to give him her heart fully again, afraid of what might happen if she let herself fall back into him completely. But every time she looked into his eyes, every time she saw the effort he was putting into making things right, she felt a flicker of hope. One evening, after another quiet dinner, James did something that caught Ava by surprise. He reached across the table, gently taking her hand in his. She looked up at him, noticing the vulnerability in his gaze. "Ava," he began, his voice soft but steady, "I know we've been through a lot, and I know that words alone can't fix everything. But I want you to know from the bottom of my heart that I'm committed to making this work. I don't just want to get back to where we were. I want us to be better than we've ever been. I want to love you like you deserve." Ava's heart fluttered at his words. It had been a long time since she had heard him speak so honestly, so openly. It wasn't just the grand gestures he had been making, it was the quiet moments like this, the simple yet profound acts of love that were beginning to make her believe in him again. "I don't want to go back to what we had either," she replied softly, squeezing his hand. "I want something new, something that's built on honesty, trust, and real connection." James nodded, his eyes searching hers as if trying to understand every unspoken thought. "And I'm willing to work for that, every day. I know I've let you down, but I'll keep showing you that I can be the man you need, that I can be the husband you deserve." There was a brief pause, and Ava felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in so long, she felt the weight of her doubts and fears begin to lift. She wasn't expecting perfection. No one was perfect. But she saw something in James now that had been absent for so long. A genuine desire to be better, to truly make things work. Ava's response was soft, almost a whisper. "I believe you, James, but it's going to take time. I'm not asking for everything to be fixed right away, but I need to know that you're here, that we're in this together." James's thumb gently stroked the back of her hand as he nodded. "We'll take it one step at a time, whatever it takes." Later that evening, as they sat side by side on the couch, the soft glow of the lamp casting a warm light over the room, James pulled her closer. Their bodies pressed together, but it wasn't just the physical proximity, it was the emotional closeness they had been missing for so long. The silence between them wasn't awkward or strained, it was comfortable, full of understanding. James, for the first time in what felt like forever, didn't rush to kiss her or touch her. He simply held her, as if savoring the closeness, allowing the bond they had lost to rebuild, piece by piece. Ava closed her eyes, resting her head on his shoulder. She could feel the warmth of his body, the steady rise and fall of his chest. In that moment, she realized something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Safe. Safe in his arms. Safe in their marriage. Safe in the knowledge that, for the first time, they were both choosing to fight for each other. Not just out of obligation, but because they truly wanted to. The quiet tenderness between them was the first true spark of intimacy they had shared in years. It wasn't rushed. There was no urgency, no pressure. It was simply two people reconnecting, learning to trust each other again. James gently lifted her chin, his eyes searching hers. "Ava," he whispered, "I don't want to take anything for granted anymore. Not you. Not us." Ava felt the heat of his words course through her, and for the first time she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of what they could become. She had been afraid to hope for so long, afraid to believe that they could find their way back to each other. But in that moment, with James holding her and his words sinking deep into her heart, she knew something had shifted. "I don't want to take anything for granted either," she whispered back, her voice thick with emotion. "But I believe in us. I believe we can find our way back together." For the first time in a long while, Ava allowed herself to fully embrace the love that had always been there, hidden under layers of pain and silence. She allowed herself to feel the spark, the flame of connection reigniting between them. It wasn't just about physical intimacy. It was about the emotional bond they had once shared, now slowly rebuilding. And as they sat there, their bodies pressed together, the quiet hum of the world outside fading away, they both knew that this was only the beginning. There would still be challenges, still moments of doubt and fear, but for the first time in years, they felt ready to face them together. The weeks that followed seemed to pass by in a blur, each day bringing a new layer of healing and connection between Ava and James. They had both come to realize that love wasn't about perfection, it was about effort, vulnerability, and the willingness to grow together. Their relationship was far from the fairy tale romance they had once dreamed of, but it was real, raw, and full of promise. Ava had finally allowed herself to fully trust James again. She was no longer looking for signs of betrayal or disappointment. She could see that he was truly trying every day to make things right. He was there, in ways that mattered, listening to her, offering her affection when she needed it, and being present in their marriage in a way he never had been before. James, too, had begun to rediscover the man he had once been, the man who had fallen deeply in love with Ava. He realized that no amount of success, no amount of wealth, could fill the void in his heart if he didn't have her by his side. Ava had become the center of his world once again, and he had finally learned what it meant to truly show up for her, not just physically, but emotionally. One night, after a quiet dinner, they sat together on the porch, the sky above them filled with the soft glow of stars. Ava felt a deep sense of peace, something she hadn't felt in years. The world around them was calm, but the tension that had once haunted their relationship had finally started to fade. James turned to her, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite put her finger on. Desire, yes, but also something deeper, longing, admiration, and something she hadn't realized she had missed so much. Connection. His gaze softened as he reached out, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Ava," he whispered, his voice low and husky, "I've never stopped loving you. Even when I couldn't show it, even when I couldn't be what you needed, I've always loved you." Ava's heart swelled at his words, but she felt something stirring within her, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. There was a tenderness in the air, a softness that had been absent for so long, but now it was undeniable. There was no longer any distance between them. Everything had come full circle. James leaned closer, his breath warm against her skin. The closeness, the shared history, the emotional connection they had spent so many years neglecting, it all felt real now. There was no rushing, no urgency. This wasn't about repairing what was broken. It was about building something new, something stronger. Ava closed her eyes as James's lips brushed softly against hers. The kiss wasn't desperate or forceful. It was gentle, tender, full of unspoken promises. It was as if the world around them had disappeared, and all that remained was this moment, the two of them together, rediscovering each other in ways they hadn't since the beginning. His hands cupped her face, his thumb brushing against her cheek in a way that felt like he was memorizing her all over again. This was no longer about longing or regret. It was about the love they had rekindled, the trust they were rebuilding, and the future they were beginning to craft together. Ava pulled back slightly, her breath shallow, her heart racing. She looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "James, I never stopped loving you either. I was just waiting for you to see me again." James's eyes softened with emotion, and he kissed her forehead gently. "I see you now, Ava. I really see you." In that moment, everything else faded away. It wasn't about the past mistakes or the years of emotional distance. It wasn't about the fear of getting hurt again or the doubts that still lingered. In the back of Ava's mind, it was about now, the present, the moment when they finally saw each other fully and completely. They kissed again, this time more deeply, as if they were trying to erase the years of silence and missed opportunities. Ava felt herself surrender to him, not just physically but emotionally, allowing herself to feel everything she had held back for so long. The world outside felt still, like time had stopped for just a moment, as if the universe was holding its breath, waiting for them to find each other once more, and then, as their kiss deepened, something shifted between them. It wasn't just the heat of passion that had been missing for so long. It was the intensity of everything they had been through. The years of emotional strain, the moments of doubt, the vulnerability they had both laid bare. All of it had led to this moment. Ava pulled back just enough to look into James's eyes, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm ready, James. I'm ready to take that leap. I'm ready for us." James's face lit up with a mixture of relief and love. "Ava, I've been ready for so long." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of emotion, of rediscovery, of love, and of a bond that was more solid than it had ever been. The passion between them wasn't just physical, it was emotional, spiritual. It was the result of years, of hardship, of struggle, of rebuilding. They had both fought for this moment, and it felt like nothing could tear them apart now. The love they had for each other was no longer tainted by the ghosts of the past. It was fresh, new, and all-encompassing. They had come full circle, not just as a couple, but as individuals who had learned to love themselves as much as they loved each other. And as they lay together in the quiet of the night, their bodies intertwined and their hearts in sync, they both knew one thing for certain: this was the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter built on trust, intimacy, and an unwavering commitment to each other. Their journey wasn't perfect, and there would be challenges ahead. But in that moment, as they held each other close, they knew they had found their way back. Not to what they had been, but to something even stronger. Together they were ready for whatever came next.